So we're pleased to have tonight Mr. Peter Hemingway with us, and he will give us the address entitled "The Bible and the Archeologist Spade."
Well, thank you, Jake. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm fairly loud as a matter of course, so if anyone can't hear me, raise your hand and I'll speak even louder. Anyway, tonight is a topic that's fascinated me for a long time, because it's quite fascinating, it's quite inspiring, it's quite encouraging that despite the length of time that's occurred since all the events, especially in the Old Testament, that people still keep finding evidence and things that are relevant to establish the validity of the events as recorded in the Bible. And really, this is what we're going to talk about: the evidence of the people and places mentioned in the Bible. We're not going to talk about the archaeology of Jerusalem or any of the other topics that might be relevant. What we're talking about is the evidence and the way in which the people and the places mentioned in the Old Testament are also mentioned in contemporary artifacts, in contemporary records. It's kind of surprising, you know, that obviously if someone does archaeology around here and they're doing archaeology of the Civil War and finding mementos of the Civil War, what we're talking about here is archaeology of events that took place at least 2,000 and sometimes 3,000 years ago. And as you can imagine, most of the evidence is buried completely. In other words, if you walk around Jerusalem and they say this is where Jesus walked, it almost certainly is not true, because he almost certainly walked about 20 feet down, because Jerusalem has been destroyed and rebuilt so many times since then that you have to dig a long way down, and this is the results of the digging is what we're going to talk about. Really, we need to establish some parameters first of all about faith and archaeology in the Bible and archaeology. Faith comes by the Word of God. It does not come by observations of nature. It doesn't and of the earth and of the heavens. It can't even come from archaeology. Obviously, if you could prove that the Bible is true, you wouldn't need the Bible, because basically you're referring to some reference that's higher and more valid than the Bible, and you can't do that, because the Bible is, we believe, the ultimate reference. It cannot prove that the Bible is the inspired and infallible Word of God. What it can do is it can strengthen our faith as we see the events and statements of the Bible repeatedly proven to be true by third-party confirmation, many of whom really don't believe in the truth of the Bible. They're just archaeologists. There's a whole group of archaeologists and a whole subculture which is sort of the minimalist school, which says that most of the Bible is not true. And then every so often one of their statements is proven to be untrue. It's kind of hard to prove anything from silence, but it's very easy to prove something by a physical artifact from the time. It, of course, it enhances our knowledge of the economic, cultural, social and political background of Bible events, but we're not going to be talking about that very much. Really what we're going to be concentrating on is the proof of the events and the statements of the Bible. And it also gives exciting clues to the lives of real people. Kind of interesting, you can see a thumbprint of one of the folks mentioned in the Bible in one of the little seals that we'll show a little bit later. The information of the Bible has been verified repeatedly. Today's scholarship has a radically new attitude toward the chronological data provided Bible. And if someone is really interested, I have a few copies of sort of a kind of handy-dandy little handout of who lived when and where. You know, I don't know if someone... Can you hand them out? Because we could have handed them out before, but obviously kind of handy-dandy little card. So really, obviously, what we're going to be talking about essentially is the events, mostly of 1000 BC to around the time of Christ. This is what we're going to be focusing on, because this most of the time, because this is the accounts of the nation of Israel. So we're going to be talking first of all about archaeological finds, but before we do that, it's always interesting as to how many Old Testament people have been found by archaeologists. In other words, of all the people mentioned in the Bible, how many have been found in contemporary records by name? You know, 10, 20, 40, 50, 100. Anyone like to guess? Okay, I happen to know because the answer is approximately 50, and obviously we can't cover all of them, but we're going to give a reasonable approximation to some of them. It's kind of staggering, and if you look at the distribution, these are all the people that are mentioned. There's 50 of them, and they go from David, who is number 21, to Cyrus, who let the children of Israel go back into the land, is number 50. You can see there's several clusters, but it's kind of interesting that they spread over a long period of time, you know, a period of time of 600 years. If you think back 600 years in this country, you know, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1400, what was it? 82 or whatever. I mean, that's about 600 years ago, you know. And if you go down to, is there any trace of Columbus left in this? Anyone find any trace of Columbus? No, you know. It's interesting, you know, that people have found so many records. I mean, we're going back a little bit before that, because this is with the people, and we're starting off by talking about places. I mean, the first place that of note, of interest to us, is the fact that Jerusalem is mentioned, you know, 1800 or 1900 years before Christ, which is about 3,000 years ago. Of course, at the time, Jerusalem wasn't the capital of Israel. That didn't happen until an awful lot longer than that. It didn't happen until around 1000 BC. But certainly Jerusalem is mentioned as one of the enemies of Egypt in 1800 BC, approximately, which is, you know, it's one of the places mentioned, and this is the oldest mention of Jerusalem that people have found. The other thing that's interesting while we're talking about Egypt and Egyptians is the Egyptian brick. You can, this is a sort of petrified version of an Egyptian brick. Obviously, if it's made out of clay or mud, it doesn't have an infinite life, but people certainly have found them. And this particular one is dated back to the time of Israeli enslavement in Egypt, which is about 1400 to 1500 BC. They've also found a small number of bricks made without straw, and they are believed to be a result of Pharaoh forcing the children of Israel to make bricks without straw. And it's kind of interesting that in the most recent issue of the Biblical Archeologist review, I think I got it, there's a little article about this, and they actually made bricks with and without straw, and they confirmed absolutely that bricks without straw were terrible bricks. They slump, they don't hold their side, are real hard to use, which sort of emphasising the trouble that the Jewish people, the children of Israel, had because really they had to gather straw instead of providing it for them, because you can't make bricks without straw. And this is a little frieze from one of the tombs in Egypt from about the same period of time, and it shows people very busily making bricks out of, you can see them pouring it into molds. I'm not going to go through it, I can spend quite a little time talking about it, but it's a very clear demonstration of how people were making bricks in that time. So now we're on to, coming on in time to the period of the Exodus. No one has yet found any real good archaeological evidence from the Sinai Peninsula, where the children of Israel wandered for 40 years. But what they have found is that the Egyptian records of the time do in fact confirm that the people that the Exodus refers to are indeed places that were in existence by that name at the time of the Exodus. So it's very clear that the Exodus was written, soon after the book Exodus, but it was written soon after that time when people really knew where those places were. The next one we're coming across is a little slab which is the first reference outside the pages of the scripture to the nation of Israel. It says on one of the lines, which down here, that Israel is devastated, having no seed. So this is by far the oldest record of the outside the Bible that proves Israel's early existence. It's kind of interesting that if you actually blew that picture up, you'll see all the little hieroglyphs, and then if you actually sort of do what people do, which is make representations of them, this is what the hieroglyphs say, and if you're an expert Egyptologist, you can read that with no problem, because it said Israel's foreign people. I have to take Egyptologist's word for it, but I certainly do. I knew a friend of mine actually was an Egyptologist who could do this sort of thing and did this sort of thing quite routinely in the British Museum. So now we come to another well-known event where, in fact, the person isn't mentioned by name, but the event surrounding the death of Samson is illustrated, because Samson said to the lad that held him by the hand, "Suffer that me that I might feel the pillars whereupon the house standeth, that I might lean upon them." And of course, Samson took hold of the two middle pillars upon which the house stood. And it's, once again, the archaeologists have found Philistine temples near Tel Aviv. Both share a unique design. The roof was supported by two central pillars. You can see these two central pillars in the middle there, and you can just see just almost see in your mind's eye Samson standing there and pushing these two pillars apart. So it's a nice illustration of the validity of the Bible. The next artifact we're going to be talking about is something called the Misha Stela, which boasts upon a victory by the 9th century Moabite king Misha over the Israelites. The monument monument, also known as the Moabite stone, because Micah conquered Israelite territory east of the Jordan, and humiliated the tribe of Gad. And it also has a possible reference to the house of David, although that's a little bit disputed. And if you turn to your Bible later and refer to the record in 2 Kings 3, it said very clearly that about that time the Moabite king rebelled against the yoke of I think it was Jeroboam, and this is indeed is what this Moabite stone is recorded. So once again we have the events of the Bible confirmed. Now the other event that's fairly well known is the Sennacherib siege of Jerusalem. This six-sided clay prison and inscribed with the 8th military campaign of Sennacherib, another name that's in the Bible. The well-known passage says that Hezekiah, another name, did not submit to the Assyrian yoke, but he shut up Hezekiah like a bird in a trap, which basically says that he shut him up in Jerusalem, but it also doesn't say, I can assure you, that he conquered Jerusalem, because the way that these memorial tablets were inscribed is that they took every opportunity to boast of their exploits, and they certainly never mentioned their defeats. So basically, the very fact that Sennacherib didn't boast of the conquering of Jerusalem is a validation of the event recorded in the Bible, where Hezekiah and Jerusalem were miraculously saved from the might of the Assyrian army. And if you I don't have time to turn up these references, but if you look in 2 Kings 18, you can see the whole event, and it's also recalled that Hezekiah paid tribute at the same time. It's interesting the three versions exist. One is in Chicago, and I did go and see it one time when I was in Chicago, so it's nice to know that not all this stuff is to be found in the British Museum or the Cairo Museum or the machine in Jerusalem. There's that one in Illinois of these, which is nice. So, and part of this 2 Kings 18 talks about the king of Assyria, saying Tartan and Rabsaris and Rabshakeh from Lachish to King Hezekiah with a great host against Jerusalem, and they went up and came to Jerusalem. And it's kind of interesting that the Assyrians actually named their years by the year of the most important figure of the year at the time. They called an eponym list. Kind of interesting if we did that. Who you named this year by, or last year named by, or 2008. Hold your hand up if you want 2008 to be named after you. Anyway, this is an Assyrian list that they were named. The names include Tartan and Rabshakeh, the two men which appeared with Rabsaris before the wall of Jerusalem. We have another couple of people that were mentioned before the wall of Jerusalem, although it is likely that both names are titles. It's not certain that they were actually the names of the people themselves. And then while we're talking about events at the same time, and thus after this Sennacherib, king of Assyria, sent his servants to Jerusalem, but he himself laid siege against Lachish, and all his power with him. And so Lachish fell, and you can see in the Lachish reliefs there's a whole long series of them, but here is this part of the Lachish relief shows Sennacherib reading the capitulation of the city. Sennacherib, king of the world, king of Assyria, On his seat he sat, and the booty of Lachish passed before him. And you can see Sennacherib sitting there on his throne with people behind him waving fans to keep him cool, and you can see people coming before him. Oh, you can see that. The best I could do with the relief. It's not particularly easy to see, but you can see the writing up there, which is translated into these words. If you know Assyrian writing of the time, which again I don't. So now we're still talking about places. We're talking about events roughly at the same time. And this Hebrew ostracon, that's some writing on a clay pot. People, you didn't have pencil and paper in those days. Your writing implements were somewhat restricted, and what you had to write on was somewhat hard. What people did in those days, obviously, it took a little bit longer than people had to chisel messages into stone. So what they actually did is they inscribed them using whatever they could onto pieces of pottery, and then they sent these pieces of pottery along. And this particular one is addressed to the commandment of the Howard fortress, asking that reinforcement be sent immediately to Elisha, the Israelite commander at another fortress, lest Edom should come. And this testifies the threat Edom posed to southern flank. Again, this is around the time of Hezekiah, and Howard is sitting here. You can see Edom the territory of Edom is just over the other side of Jordan. And sorry about that. People don't normally call me this time of night. I must apologise for that. I'll be back to silence my phone. There we go. Now they start. Okay, so this again, a place to demonstrate the validity of the Bible. I mean, the next thing is that what it says in 1 Kings 9 and 15 is that Solomon rebuilt 3 cities, Hazor, Megiddo and Gezer, and Yigil Nadin, who's a very well-known archaeologist, discovered that all 3 cities had identical gates and walls. The gates all have 6 chambers and are plastered with benches along the sides, which is perhaps not to be surprised when you think that obviously if you got one design done, you replicate it. And so it seems evidence of the fact that Solomon built them all to the same. And you can see another view of that people have. You can see the gate. You can see all these walls. The two different places. You can see that they have very similar layouts. So now we come along to the silver of Tarshish, where the king's ships went to Tarshish with a servant that paid them every 3 years. Once came the ships of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. It's always a bit tricky as to figuring out where you get ivory, apes and peacocks all in the same place, but that's a subject of another discussion. But here we have silver of Tarshish to the house of the Lord, to the house of Yahweh, pursuant to the order to you of Ashur the king, given by the hand of Zechariah, silver of Tarshish to the house of Yahweh, 3 shekels. So here we have silver of Tarshish recorded. And so now, having sort of mostly talked about places, we're going to be talking for a few minutes about people. Some of the 50 people that we referred to earlier. And obviously we first house of David, howbeit the Lord will not destroy the house of David because of the covenant that he made with David. And he's promised to give a light to him and to his sons forever. And here we have the house of David recorded in an Aramaic victory steeler, which is discovered at Tel Dan, inscribed on the tail of the phrase David, or the house of David. And it's interesting because obviously people, the nihilists were saying that both David and Solomon were figments of the writers of the Old Testament, and they weren't real people at all. And then we have, and now we have an Aramaic victory steeler, which talks about victories, and it talks about the problem they had with the house of David. So it's pretty clear that David was a pretty significant individual at the time, and obviously this particular victory steeler is dated from back, not quite from the house of from the time of David, but from 100 or so years later, when clearly David's descendants were in full control. And while we're talking about David, why not Solomon? Here we have Solomon's seal. One side of this cylindrical seal used to stamp official documents. We'll talk about seals quite a bit later because it'll figure in a lot of the names. The spelling Shalomu, the Hebrew name for Solomon. On the seal's other side, a royal figure bearing a scepter is depicted. The figure skirt-like garment is recognized, is reminiscent of the ephod, recorded as being worn by King David. So we have the Solomon, and about the same time we have another person mentioned in the Bible. This time it's Shishak, king of Egypt. He came up against Jerusalem when Rehoboam was king, and he took away treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house. He even took away all, and he took away all the shields of gold which Solomon had made. And what the son of Shishak then did is he took all the gold that he could lay his hands on and put them in the pyramid, or at least a burial mound that he made. And here we have a bracelet of the son of Shishak, a gold bracelet which belonged to Shishak's son. He was the one who squirreled all this gold away, a lot of it. And it may well be that this particular bracelet could well have been made of the gold taken from the house of Yahweh in Solomon's time. Again, Shishak, mentioned in the Old Testament, a real person very clearly. And here we have the hieroglyphics in the centre of this beetle-shaped seal, Salat Yabkar, the Egyptian transliteration of the Semitic name Jacob, one form of Jacob. So here we have Jacob being mentioned in a scarab seal. And again, this is a theme. We're going to be talking quite a bit about seals, because obviously what people did in those days is that instead of signing a document, they'd have the scribe write it. Most of the important people either couldn't write or didn't want to write, and then they'd take their official seal and stick it into a lump of clay, which would seal the envelope. I mean, people did that until fairly recently, a wax seal on an envelope, and certainly into the 19th century. This is a picture which unfortunately has been missing since soon after discovery in 1904, but it refers to Shema, servant of Jeroboam. So here we have Jeroboam being mentioned in the Old Testament. And here we have Jehu, son of Omri, silver, a golden beaker, slave for the hand of the king. I, Salamander, received them from him. And this event is referred to in 2 Kings 9 verse 14. And people often wonder whether this person kneeling on the floor is actually Jehu, in which case it's the only representation of a king of Israel that we have. There's a lot of dispute about that, but I personally think it probably is Jehu. I like to think of him, who is famous, of course, for driving rapidly. You know, and obviously that has echoes to this day and age of people driving rapidly. So Jehu is fairly well known in certain circles as a model of the drivers around Detroit. Not this time of year because you're too busy dodging the potholes, but certainly when it's nice and sunny, eventually you'll see people driving like Jehu. So Hoshea, the son of Elah, to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years, one of the minor kings of Israel. You'll find him mentioned on that handout I gave out as to put them in the context. And here we have a seal of Abdai, servant of Hoshea, kind of a fancy seal. This is really what they looked like. And we have a lot of these seals, but we don't have very many of the holder. But this is a seal holder, and you can see the seal. And Abdi was ministry of King Hoshea, the last king of Israel. And so this is a blow for that particular seal. Apparently was sold in 1993 for 80,000. So these days it's probably worth $500,000. So fairly valuable seal. So coming on to this seal, we have Zedekiah the minister. This seal is approximately, it's kind of small, 0.4 a centimetre in diameter, and inscribed in ancient Hebrew script with the name of Jehoiakal ben Shalamah ben Shaivi, or Jehoiakal, son of Shalamiah. And he noble who, according to Jeremiah 37 verse 3, was sent by King Zedekiah to Jeremiah with a message asking the prophet to pray for the Lord for us, at the time when Jerusalem was attacked by Babylonians led by Nebuchadnezzar. So we have some sort of minor figure. How many people would if you said Jehu, who was Jehoiakal, son of Shalamiah, be able to say, put up your hand and say, I remember him, But here we have his name recorded from all those years ago, and there's quite a few of these of minor people that suddenly come along. We have Azariah, the son of Hilkiah, and he is the seal of Azariah, the son of Hilkiah. Here we have Hilkiah, the high priest, as he came from the secretary. I found the book of the law in the temple of the Lord, and he gave it to Shaphan, who read it, which is a fairly famous event when the book of the law was rediscovered after not being read by anybody apparently for several hundred years. Here we have another one, Hannah, son of Hilkiah. The ring's inscription belonging to Hannah, the priest, and the ring still holds an agate seal. Here we have a king. So Uzziah slept with his father, and they buried him with his father in the field of the burial, which belonged to the king, for he said, he is a leper. And here we have the funerary inscription of Uzziah, king of Judah. Hither was brought the bones of Uzziah, king of Judah. Do not open, because although they were prepared to move the bones in a place. They were so afraid of leprosy that they didn't anyone touching the bones. Then we have Jeremiah, the son of Shaphan, the scribe. Then read Baruch in the words of Jeremiah in the house of the Lord, in the chamber of Jeremiah, the son of Shaphan, the scribe. And there we have, you can see a whole collection of these seals which were found in and around Jerusalem. And here we have one of these clay artifacts. Obviously, whatever they sealed is long gone, but the clay still left. Like I said, Jeremiah was a prominent member of King Jehoiakim's court, so he was a fairly important person. Then we have one which I quite like. Then Jeremiah called Baruch the son of Neriah, and Baruch wrote from the word of Jeremiah all the words of the Lord which he had spoken into the roll of a book. And here we have another seal with Baruch son of Neriah, which is interesting. And you see this fingerprint off to the top, well, your left, my right, with a fingerprint there, which I'm sure if you were a CIA or FBI person, you could probably take that fingerprint and run it through your record, and hopefully it wouldn't come up with a map, because it belongs to Baruch, and he pressed a seal upon the document about 2,500 years ago or so. So it's a kind of an old fingerprint that still exists. And here we have Jeremiah, the son of Pilate. We have an awful lot of these, as you can see. Here we have another of these minor characters, and there's an interesting story about this. This is how Jerusalem was taken. This is from Jeremiah 39, verse 3. Then all the officials of the king of Babylon came and took seats in the middle gate. Nergal-Sharezer, Nebo-Sarkaisim, a chief officer, Nergal-Sharezer, a high official, and all the other officials of the king of Babylon. I mean, obviously, how many people, if there was asked who Nebuchadnezzar was, there was, probably not too many people remember the name. However, there was an Egyptologist who was studying these receipts in the bowels of the British Museum in London. You go down there, so I'm told. I have never been given permission there, but my Egyptologist friend used to spend a day a month there. You've got hundreds and thousands of these clay artifacts which were uncovered in most of them in the 19th century, and so we have some Egyptologists sort of just reading this receipt, and obviously it's written in an Assyrian script, which probably only about 10 people in the world can recognise. But this particular individual remembered the name and said, can you imagine the excitement when he saw this receipt written, but from the right period, mentioning the name we remembered from Jeremiah 13 verse 3. Obviously no one ran computer comparison like they might do in these days, because this was about 40 or 50 years ago, before the advent of computers, so it relied upon human memory. So here we go, fragment of a receipt from a payment made by a figure in the Old Testament. So this is going back to 587 BC, and we have another brother from Sariah, the son of Jeremiah, another individual from Jeremiah. It's not entirely surprising that there's a lot of seals exist from those days, because obviously when Jerusalem was sacked during the time of Jeremiah, basically all the debris was buried upon under a pile of rubble, and of course the seals being made of clay would survive the fire mostly, and so they survived to be dug out 2,500 years later, and this is what they did. So now we'll talk a few minutes about ancient manuscripts, just a very few minutes. Going forward. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance on you and give you peace. And here we have a silver scroll from the found in 1979, which is 2,600 years old. So this particular silver scroll antedates the Dead Sea Scroll by several centuries, and is certainly the oldest extant piece of a biblical text that we have. This priestly blessing, which is meaningful so to us, was so significant 2,500 years ago. This is worn around the neck with a leather strap close to the heart, and obviously we know that observant Jews these days wear phylacteries on their foreheads, which have some of the same words. Of course, the Dead Sea Scroll, you could do a whole presentation on the significance and validity of the Dead Sea Scroll. This is the first Isaiah scroll. The thing that's amazing is how close the Hebrew is to the Hebrew text, which is the basis of our Bible, which was actually written down and codified 1,000 years later, and the changes that were made, that have been made, or that have been made since over that 1,000 years, are almost insignificant. It's remarkable and so now we have the old. We showed you the oldest record of the Old Testament. This is the oldest record of the New Testament. This pictured fragment is from John 18, verse 31, and the script is dated to roughly 125 AD. So it's written. So this fragment is at least. It could well be a second generation, in other words, copied from the original. I'm English, so it's kind of interesting that this particular fragment is in a library in the city where I went to university. So I hied myself down one day and had a look at it behind bulletproof glass, and people standing there making sure you didn't make any move toward it. But it's interesting that you can see the actual piece. So now we come into the New Testament, which obviously is not nearly so replete with archaeological finds, because obviously the New Testament, at least the Gospel, only occurred over a period of 30 years or so. So as you might expect, there's not too much. But certainly we have Caesar Augustus. Gaius Octavius, the first Roman Empire, became supreme ruler in 29 BC and named Caesar Augustus by the Roman Senate in 27 BC. He was emperor when Jesus was born, just as Luke 2 verse 1 claims. Now this bronze head, we've got a couple of versions which look kind of the same but they're different. This bronze head was found in Sudan in northern Africa, as it happened. So now we have Tiberius Caesar. In the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, Luke 3 verse 1, Pontius Pilate being governor of Caesar. So first of all we have Tiberius Caesar. Look, actually I think they look quite handsome, don't you, these emperors? If one of these walked down the street, you wouldn't think anything of it, would you really? Fairly decent haircut, clean shaven, not a normal person. So here we have Tiberius Caesar, Tiberius Claudius Nero. So, and now we have Pontius Pilate, discovered in 1962. I mean, a lot of this stuff has only been discovered later. At Caesarea, in secondary use in a later wall. In other words, people had taken this building stone and used it in a later wall. So it's kind of, that is why it survived. This also settled the debate over whether Pilate's title of prefect was the inferior procurator. And here we have a close-up view of it, and here we have a better view. So here we have Tiberium Pontius Prefectus of Judea, which is written in Latin, and you know, this is in a Roman script, and I did Latin in high school, but I can't say my Latin is up to snuff because it's more than a year or two ago. So anyway, we have the Pilate inscription. We have poems of Pontius Pilate. You can see it. There we go. Judea coin issued by Pilate in 30 AD. The Greek inscription reads Tiberius Caesarus, of Tiberius Caesar. But in the centre is a litius, a curved crook used by Roman August. Or this pagan religious symbol was used frequently a Roman coin minted outside Palestine. Pilate was the only Roman prefect to have put it on money issues for commerce among the Jews, which is why the Jews didn't like him at all. You know, this was doing something that they totally disapproved of. So now we have Caiaphas. They led him, Jesus, away to Annas first, for he was father-in-law to Caiaphas. And here we have the Caiaphas family burial chamber, which was discovered in 1990. This considers six ossuaries, two of which had been robbed. But it's interesting that we have the one of Joseph, son of Caiaphas, which has the body of 6 people, 2 infants, a child, an adult female, and a man of roughly 60 years of age. And quite who they are, we don't know, but certainly these are the bones of the family of Caiaphas. And this is the inscription on the side is above and the back of the ossuary is inscribed Caiaphas' name, Joseph Bar, son of Caiaphas. So now we come to one of the more interesting and I have to say controversial find of the last few years. In 2002, the Biblical Archeology Review revealed that this ossuary had been found, and this was a burial box of James, the brother of Jesus. This date has been confirmed to a period of BC 20 to AD 70, so it's a right period. It seemed possible, perhaps likely from the statistics, that it was indeed the burial box of James, the brother of Jesus Christ. And this is what it reads: Yaakov bar Yosef Achudi Yeshua, which is James, the son of Joseph, the brother of Jesus. This has been a continuing saga for the last decade or so, and the latest event that happened a couple of months ago is that the owner of the ossuary had been sued by the Israeli authorities for forgery. And about 2 months ago, he was declared innocent. In other words, there was no evidence of forgery of this ossuary, which is kind of interesting. Again, it's a controversial topic, having read a lot about thing we have is a nice little inscription where we said where there were people were complaining about Paul having brought a Gentile into the temple based simply on the fact that they saw the two in company in Jerusalem, and they therefore assumed that he'd this Trophimus, an Ephesian, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple, and have broken down the middle wall of partition between us, which is a sort of a strange simile until you realise what he's talking about. And this is the temple warning which was found, almost the only relic of Herod's temple, which was written in Greek, and it says, "No foreigner is to go beyond the balustrade and the plaza of the temple zone. Whoever is caught doing so will have himself to blame for his death, which will follow." I like that. And this is the wall of the middle temple that Paul was talking about in Ephesians. So, and this is the actual inscription that was on this balustrade all along. So, if you knew that you were a Gentile, you should know a lot better than to cross this balustrade, this low wall. Whoever is caught doing so will have himself to blame for his death, which will follow. So, and this is I think this is the last one I'm going to show. This is a coin from a second revolt, AD 132 to 135, which shows this depiction of the Jerusalem temple, which was destroyed some 60 years ago, but not actually before they sort of resurrected some sort of sacrifice on the Temple Mount. So we have not followed. So to sum up, all that we have been talking about doesn't entirely prove that the Bible is true, but it certainly shows that we have not followed cunningly devised fables when we made known unto you the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but were eyewitnesses of his majesty. For we see from God the Father honour and glory, when they came such a voice to him from the excellent glory, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And this voice which came from heaven we heard when we were with him in the Holy Mount. We also have a more sure word of prophecy, this Bible of ours, whereunto you do well that you take heed that unto a light that shineth in a dark place until the day dawns and the day star arise in your hearts. So what we've heard tonight is a demonstration of the truth of the existence of so many of the places and people that we read about in the Bible, derived entirely from the record and the records of the time. And like I said, I've always been fascinated by this truth, and every few months there's another one that I put into my little collection, and I hope that the Lord will come before I finish doing that. So thank you for your attention.